All right, and welcome back, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about the causes of the Great Depression. And we want to start out by reminding you, just like many of the wars we've talked about, that the Great Depression has what we call multiple causation. There's underlying and immediate causes. What does it mean when we say underlying causes, Mr. Hoven?
Underlying causes as opposed to immediate causes are something that builds up over time, and it takes a period of time to have that take effect.
Yeah, and then the immediate cause is that point of no return. So let's get into it. The Great Depression.
So the first cause we're going to look at is the stock market crash.
Boom!
Now, when the stock market crashed, it undermined the country's ability to hold out against other economic problems. What happened was most of the stock prices dropped, triggering a mass selling of these stocks. Selling price was so far less than the purchasing price, most stocks were worthless. And to pay off loans, people rushed to the banks to withdraw their savings.
And the biggest day that we see that drop in value, right, is a day known as Black Tuesday, October 29th, 1929. And something you said there about trying to pay off loans goes into something known as buying on margin. See, what people had been doing, investors, had been borrowing money in order to buy stock. And as we know, the stock market's kind of like legalized gambling. It goes up, it goes down, you're never sure what it's going to do. So as long as stocks are going up, you're okay. You can pay off those loans. But if stock starts going down, you're in trouble because you still are on the hook for those original investments. And a lot of people will lose everything.
This crash, triggered by buying on margin, creates a panic throughout America. And as people are rushing to these banks looking to withdraw their life savings to pay off these loans, they're finding out that the banks do not have their money.
That's a great point, Mr. Hoven, about people running to the banks. In fact, that's what it was called, is a bank run. People are lining up to take out those savings. And guess what? The bank only has so much money on hand. Loans were not being repaid, and banks did not have enough cash on hand, and 5,000 plus banks closed by 1932. And then, back then in the 1920s and 30s, when a bank closed, the depositors lost their savings.
That's a great point as well. The big part of this is there was no insurance on the money that was put into the banks at this time. Therefore, if you went back at any time to gather this money, especially when the stock market crashed, there's no guarantee it will be there.
Right, and a lot of people who are still alive today that were alive during the Depression lost all faith in banks, and I know my grandfather, up until the point when he passed away a few years ago, did not keep his savings in a bank account.
So now that we've looked at the stock market crash and the bank failures as causes of the Great Depression, let's turn and look at another cause, which was overproduction and underconsumption. At this time during the U.S. history, more efficient machinery led to an increase of production of capacity factors for factories and farmers.
That's right, and as a result, they were making too much. So much that people couldn't consume those goods or those foods.
And some people had turned to installment buying, which is where the individual would buy a good and pay a small down payment while paying the rest off in monthly installments as time went on.
Much like people do with their cars still nowadays. Some people do it when they go to a place like Best Buy. It's still a practice that's used. We just don't necessarily label it as installment buying all the time.
And when all these goods being produced, there becomes too much of a supply and not enough demand. So when there's too much of a good available and not enough demand for it, prices will go down or people won't buy it.
That's right. And because that people were finding themselves more and more in debt because of this installment buying, and a lot of people had lost their savings, less people are willing to take on new debt. So that's another reason that we see underconsumption and we see overproduction. It's a simple rule of economics, folks. There is too much supply and not enough demand. That leads to trouble, and what that will lead to as far as businesses and farmers go is unemployment will skyrocket. And that means we're going to face even more underconsumption as a result of the fact that people don't have money to spend. So all of these causes that we've talked about, stock market crash, bank failures, overproduction, underconsumption, will create a tornado or a downward spiral. It will continue to get worse. All right, like we said, when people lose their jobs, they consume less. So it is getting worse and worse and worse. It's building on itself. And Americans quickly turn to their politicians to ask, what will you do to get us out of this? And that's where we'll pick up next time when we talk about Herbert Hoover.
The vacuum guy?
No, not the vacuum guy.
The president.
The president. That's a little thing, if any of you have ever seen Home Alone 2 with Macaulay Culkin. Great holiday movie. I would recommend it.